Hi, I'm Jay, and today I'm at the bench tying bodies for walleye streamers. Stay tuned. And we're back. So, good morning. Today we're almost live. Just thought I'd turn the cameras on. What I've been doing is tying walleye streamers just to fill some of the inventory on the website. So I'm just going through. What I usually do is I'll tie the bodies first, get a few dozen of each, and then add hair in the different quantities that I want. So these flies are sold in packs of 3, and I've gotten, I think I had 4 or 5 packs of each size. Let me just switch you over here. What I'm using is a Daiichi 2460. It's an Aberdeen hook, nice round bend, size 1, 1/0, and size 2. So those are the sizes that I tie these flies in. Initially the thought was a hook and a fly body that was basically the same size as a similar sized walleye jig. So the 1/4 or 3/8, 1/2, and 5/8 walleye jigs, that size. So that's, in my mind, how I worked it out, the sizes that I wanted to do. There are other hooks that are very, very good, but the Daiichi is a decent hook. And as you see, as I put one in the vise, it does have the straight eye, because we are fishing these either individually or tandem in the rivers, in current. Some guys troll with these, and let's get it straight in my vise here. So that's what we're tying today. You can use a nice flat thread for this to get a nice smooth body. I want just a slight bit of bulk. There's a couple flies that we do that use this tinsel yarn for a body, which I really like because it does create a little bit of drag in the current. Just double check. Let's... All right. So that's what I'm doing today. I haven't been tying a whole lot lately. Just giving my right hand a little bit more time to heal. I did start doing these because it was small batches of hooks. So, like I said, these are for flies that I'm just listing on the website, and they're in groups of 3. So it's not terribly hard for me to just tie up a dozen, let's say, and then take a break. Let's see, just make space on my rack here. So for this first batch, I have a Mylar tinsel. This is a size 10 or a medium tinsel, but it's a Danville size 10. But other brands, they might list it as medium. It's got a gold side and a silver side, and these are going to be gold with a little bit of a red tag sticking out, red tail. So I put the Mylar tinsel on the shank of the hook, gold size down, and then with touching wraps I can walk my thread back up about a hook eye's length away from the eye of the hook. And I'm using size A thread just because it's cheap. Like I said, you can use a thin floss or a flat fly tying thread to get a nice smooth body. But these are being fished in a river, in current. A little bit of resistance on that fly as the water flows past, I think helps with the action and the feel on your rod tip, of course. So we're just going to bring the tinsel around, and these are touching wraps. Overlapping wraps, what you'd find is every 2 or 3 rotations you'd get a kink in the material that's terribly hard to flatten out. But touching wraps, everything will lay fairly flat. And then we're just locking it into place. Still leaving a little bit of space here on the hook, a bare hook shank behind the eye. And to finish these, I just put a drop of very thin head cement, lacquer-based head cement on each side of the head and tail. Just to help protect those threads. You could fish with these without the lacquer thinner over and over and over. Occasionally you're going to get a fish though that kind of rakes its teeth across those threads. So that's really, I'm not looking to glue it together just like a jig. I'm not looking to glue it together. That it'll just add a little bit of protection when you're fishing for those species that have teeth. Double check. I didn't look. Didn't look at the time, like I never do. And I didn't look at my volume. Hope everything's good. I believe it will be. Had trouble hooking up camera 1. I don't have my extra monitor in front of me because the last video, if you saw it, I was in the garage, so I had the a different GoPro, but I still hook it up to my monitor, my phone, to use as a monitor. And when I was trying to connect with this one, it kept trying to find the other one, even though I disconnected it and had the Wi-Fi turned off, all that stuff. But it wasn't worth the extra 20 minutes or so of messing around with the camera. I just turned it on and I can see that it's at least got the image going through it to the computer. So that's all that's important. So we haven't had much going on. I do need to get the cameras turned on a little bit more frequently. And things will change up a little bit. Have been busy tying the steelhead jigs, so I'd like to turn the camera on once or twice more for that. Ice fishing, that's going to be starting in a couple months. So we need to, I've actually made some deliveries with ice jigs already, and we're into October now. But as the temperatures drop, that will pick up a little bit more out. So I do have an inventory ready to go if I get calls, but I'll spend a few weeks tying what I think I'll need, you know, filling some of the gaps, things that sold a lot last year, etc. So I guess today is an example of the not glorious part of tying, only because we're not tying anything super fancy, and this is fairly boring. I'm tying streamer bodies, preparing them for the next step, and this is, you know, kind of a basic thing. It's not a finished product by any means, but it's one of those things that you have to do. And though it's fun to tie, you know, the fancy, I'd love to be able to do airheads all the time. You know, do that fancy painting all the time. Add the extra 2 or 3 colors. Add the extra tinsels and different body materials for a fancier jig. But most fishermen are fishing with basic material, basic jigs, basic colors. Why is this not working? Hold on. Bear with me. Kind of a mistake. Let's fix this. So I did reverse the thread just slightly, not all the way because I had already snipped my mylar, but just enough to put those threads back in line. I did have a lot of good response from the last video where we were out in the garage, and I had just recently purchased a vise off the eBay, and you know, I just threw the cameras on showing all the steps I take to clean them up, you know, make them serviceable. It's the same steps as every 6 months or so. I take apart my own vise, give it a cleaning, you know, change out the bushing. I've talked about this rubber bushing that I like to use. But I'm glad everybody liked that. I've actually listed a second vise that I picked up recently as well. There's been a handful of Universal 2s for sale on eBay. If you find them, you know, anything under 80 bucks is usually, you know, worth picking up, even for something that looks like, you know, if it sat in the basement for 30 years, you know, or sat up in an attic in a box for 30 years. You know, they're almost indestructible. And so with a little bit of oil and a little sandpaper, a little TLC, and you can put these Universal 2 vices back into service pretty easily. And they're solid. They're, you know, I guess there are really, really good vices you find on the market. You've seen some of my other vices, the different brands that I like to use. But I've consistently used a universal 2 since I was a teenager, preteen, 12 years old when I first started tying. And, you know, there's something to be said for that, because I guess if there was a better vice, I would have switched to it by now. But, you know, so I guess that's a testament. You know, it's not just that I like them. You know, I guess my reason is that it's one of those things, if it's not broken, don't fix it. And I haven't found anything that's better. I found others that were good in their own way. But I've really enjoyed tying on a universal 2. So go to the website, check it out. Check out the other one I just posted. Just like the one we did in the garage, the tolerances on this other one were pretty solid. So I didn't use an O-ring. I didn't use this one. Actually, I use a square of masking tape, just a tiny, I don't know, 3mm square piece of masking tape. I'll put that on the jaw shaft, inside the shaft here, just to take up some of that play. I'm having trouble putting these in straight. What is my problem? So I add this size A, the base of size A, onto the shank with touching wraps. And I walk the thread all the way back, halfway between the point and the bend of the hook. And then I bring it forward just past the point of the hook. So that's my tag end. I keep calling it a tag. It doesn't extend like a tail. And then I walk the thread back up towards the eye of the hook, still leaving a hook shank, a bare hook shank behind the eye. And as I wrap the mylar, you can see that there's a tag of red sticking out. I'm going to have to look at my books, and there's a better term. It's not really a tag. A tag, to me, is describing similar, a color that sticks out past the mylar, but as a tail, a short little tail. I'll research the proper term. If you know what that term is, you put that down below. I'll research that term and I'll put it somewhere in the screen here. I recently, last week, received a new book. It's something of a biography on Reuben Cross, my favorite fly tyer from the Catskills, one of the founding fathers of fly tying. And I say somewhat of a biography. It might be sold as a biography, but there's also a lot of history and some of the other tyers in the area. of the time. So we're talking the first half of the 20th century. But it was really nice to see. It's nice to get some good information, new information on some of the old tires. But if you have a chance or an inclination, it's called the Never Sinker. Oh shoot, the author escapes me. Do I have it handy? Don't think I do. I'll put that information. I'll put some of that information down below as well. It was a nice book. It was a nice read. It's not a giant novel by any means, but some really good history on some of the tires that were very influential on the Catskill style of fly tying. So again, this Mylar is going on with touching wraps, not overlapping. If you did overlap them, what you would get is every 2 or 3 rotations, you get a kink in one of the layers where it sticks up. It won't lay flat. It's not terrible, and if you keep the wraps fairly tight, it's usable still. Is it a desirable thing? For what these flies are, how they're fished, it could be, because just like using the tinsel yarn, it would create a little bit of drag and resistance in the current. So it wouldn't necessarily be a negative thing. It probably would offer a little bit of movement in the water. So I have about 9 more of these to do for this size. So we're doing size 1. I think I have a size 2 up here. And what we'll do, the size 2s are dry. I did those last night. So here's a nice finish, size 2. It's that same hook, the Daiichi 2460. Red thread, gold Mylar. And we'll just tie a couple up real quick. So this is going to I use a 2-aught. This actually might be a 3-aught black thread. It looks like a 3-aught, but usually for the thread that sits up here on the side, these bobbins are usually my 2-aught only. But it doesn't look like 2-aught to me. But if it was a 3-aught, I would have written on the side. So I don't know why this is on my table. I might have just quickly grabbed a spool just to do something real quick. And then for flash for these, I'm using a Crystal Hair CH20. This is some old stock that I have. Crystal Hair, Crystal Flash, Angel Hair, it's all a similar material. And the CH20, it's a pearl color, but it's got somewhat of it's a little bit of pink, a little bit of yellowy, greenish kind of hue to it. but it's a pearl, and when I hold it out in front of me, the light, it kind of looks pinkish. As I bring it closer, it looks a little yellow flash in it. But that's what I like with this. What we're tying are red. This is just a basic red streamer. Maybe I'm out of practice. That's why I can't put the hook in the vise straight. So we're going to lock our black thread on and go with the thinnest thread that you're comfortable with. It'll be easier to make a nice pretty head on the streamer. You want it strong enough where you can add a little bit of pressure because we are tying a bucktail. Flat thread in this instance would be a good choice as well. So these flies are fairly sparse. Now if I was, where's my tools? If I were doing a red and white, for example, something that's two color, I would take half the size of this pinch, but since this is a single color fly, I tie these fairly sparse. There's a couple examples you can find online. And I forget this guy's name too. He's a good tyer. But he ties his walleye fly super sparse, even half of what this pinch is. And just like with the jig, the length of the body past the bend of the hook is just before the black part here on my vise. So that's what I'm going for. Just taking out any of the hairs that are kind of, the tips are sticking out right in the middle, so they're a little short. I keep the pressure on my pinch, oh that hurt, nice and tight, because I don't want this wing to rotate around the hook. I want it to stay on the top. I want to keep the hair fibers compact so that when I do let them go and they relax, they're being held in place by the thread, so they're not going to pop out. So as you can see the bottom of the hook shank here. I do have a rogue hair. And then you can work your thread back and forth just to build a nice tapered head. I'm okay with that. Then we'll just whip finish. Now this is a type of fly that I do often use a UV resin as a head cement if you want that nice candy shell. For these I'm just using the same lacquer based head cement. Let it saturate those threads nicely. And I do give, occasionally I'll rotate the vise back and forth just a couple times, just so it saturates in evenly. But there you have it. It's a basic, oh, shame on me. Well, there you have a nice fly. What size hook was that, did I say? That was a 2. This is live, guys. So we're not going to cut that out. How come nobody told me I wasn't using the crystal flash? So that was a 2. All right, so I will not. That was a nice fly. Let's put these other 2 up here because I do not have a third one. Have to order some hooks. That size I don't have. Those are my last 3 that I was just going to do up real quick. So let's try this again. So here's one of the number 1 hooks that we did first. You can see it's been a while since I tied. I can't talk and do all the steps correctly. So we got our crystal hair out and didn't even use it. Let's try this again. So this hook's size 1, one size bigger, but it's going to be the same thing. Lock on our 2/0 thread. This, like I said, this might be a 3/0. Go back, find our nice sparse pinch. I'll throw that fly in my box. It was a decent fly, just didn't have any extra tinsel on it. So like I said, we stack the hairs just like a jig. Just stack them by hand, try to keep it natural looking, those kind of uniform. Picking out some of the short ones, the medium-sized hairs. So in his books, we were talking about the Never Sinker biography for Reuben Cross. But in his books, the sections on streamer tying, particularly bucktail streamers, he instructs tying a fly with a very sparse wing, that you're imitating a bait fish, and that it's best to have everything very sparse. This wing, that's probably the thickest that you'd want it. It would be completely fine if you went just a little bit thinner. Not a big deal. This is the amount of hair that you'd have if you had two colors on there. So the amount of hair is just fine, but if you went even more sparse, would be completely fine. Surprisingly, the walleye, I don't know what they're, in my mind they're eating bait fish when they see a fly like this. But you would think that the thicker the gob would represent a larger prey. Goodness, what is this? There we go. So I'm just locking this into place just above the bottom bunch of hair. What I have here is 3 strands of the crystal hair. I'll rotate my vise to put 3 on this side. Now I could take longer strands of the crystal hair and put it under my last loop of thread and just pull it back down, on each side of this fly. But to me that wastes material. If I was only doing 1 or 2, that really would be an easy way to do that. But when I tie that way, I tend to have too much sticking out at the end that I'm either trimming off or vice versa. So for me, I'm just picking 3 strands, putting it down one side, 3 strands, putting it down the other. I do rotate my vise just so I can take a look at each side to see how this thread is laying. That's good. And again, we'll just finish this head with our lacquer-based head cement. Now as I'm rotating this, the crystal hair is kind of flopping around, and when this is in the water and in the current, just like marabou, everything's going to come together and flow together. It's a nice fly. Let me see if I can, it's the best way to what do you think? Really nice fly. I do like fishing red. I like fishing red and white. Those are old-timer colors. But it's a combination that I've always liked fishing. Always had success with. And in our area, anything with black and purple is going to be a go-to color, and olives. So it's all the colors that you've seen us tie jigs with pretty consistently over this past year. Olives, browns, creams, some fluorescents like chartreuse, fluorescent yellow, but then the dun colors. I have some the hook shanks tied with the crystal yarn, that dun and chartreuse, which is a color I found by accident. You know, there's different rubber tails and whatnot, other jigs that you might fish with, that dun silver body with a chartreuse is pretty popular. I tied up a jig with a blue dun, a yellow chartreuse, and a lot of flash. And have always had success in our local rivers here. So I definitely tie up a bunch of those streamers, but it's that dun and chartreuse with the golden crystal yarn for the body. And again, that crystal yarn adding a little bit of bulk and texture, so as that streamer goes through the current, just creates a little bit more drag, a little bit more sensitivity on the rod tip, slows it down, maybe pulls it down a little bit in the water. So the bodies we just tied with the Mylar tinsel, they might, let's say they ride 2 foot under the surface. The one with the crystal yarn might be 2 foot and 3 plus 3 inches, let's say. So I probably don't know as much as I should on fishing those, but just thinking about it in my mind, how the shape of the body, the texture of the body, how that's going to react when you're fishing with it, that's what I'm seeing in my mind. Something that floats at one level, a little bit more texture is going to pull it down. And it's the same rule of thought, or the direction of thought. Bates talks about it a lot in his books. Pretty much any of the old-timey streamer tires, Carrie Stevens, the tandem streamers where they would add beads. Now the beads were an attractor, they look cool. You can get really, bright colors, flashy colors, but the beads themselves added a slight bit of weight, but more importantly a bit of drag. So as you're trolling with these flies, would pull the fly down. So that's my thought process with these. I hope that makes sense. Oh my goodness. But I think that's going to do it for us today, guys. Like I said, we're going to I'm going to get back at the bench and really start tying a little bit more. My hand is feeling a little bit better. So if I get through these flies, just doing small batches, I'm going to get back into, sitting and tying 10 dozen in a row. You know what I mean? Sitting down every evening, sitting down, kind of my old schedule. Not that I'm behind in the inventory, but it's always good to keep up on that. Especially now I know that we still have the steelhead run, and the places up north that are throwing in orders. And then ice fishing will be soon. We're praying for a nice long cold winter, right? Would love to be on the ice by mid-December. That's not usually the case, but boy, would that be nice. But I think that's going to do it for us today. As always, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any new content. Feel free to share any of the videos, as it does help increase awareness for the channel. Stop on by the website, jworthhandtied.com. You'll see these flies listed. Like I said, there's another Universal 2 that's been cleaned up for sale, as well as a lot of the other things that have been listed over the summer. I have added jigs just to increase the inventory counts on those. And it's been pretty nice. We've had pretty consistent turnover, I guess, customers coming through the website. So it's nice to see. But I think that's going to do it for us today, guys. So as always, tie yourself up some streamer bodies. Keep tying. Tie lines.